Deputy Catherine Murphy, please.
Yeah, Taoiseach, I agree with you about the importance of people getting the booster. I received mine about 10 days ago. In the same week, it was announced that walk-ins would be accommodated. People in the queue I was in City West were being told only people with appointments would receive a booster. The wait that day was about 3.5 hours. The following day, it was 5 hours. City Hall in Cork, Croke Park, were all reporting long queues. So it's understandable that people would make appointments with their pharmacy instead. Yesterday you said that in the week commencing November the 22nd, there were 208,000 appointments for boosters, with only 80,000 people turned up. And last week there were 180,000 appointments, but only 93,000 people turned up. The first obvious question arises is, why was there approximately 30,000 fewer appointments last week than the previous week? Secondly, what you failed to mention yesterday is the ongoing problems with the booking system. Eligible people can now get boosters from the GPs, the pharmacies, or indeed the vaccination centre. The only problem is that the systems don't seem to be capable of talking to each other. People in the eligible groups for a booster, but who have had COVID in the past 6 months, making them ineligible, are still getting appointments. Is the system capable of picking that up? Instead of blaming people for not turning up to their appointments, can you tell us what's being done to resolve the problems with the booking system? This is especially important given the appointments are coming on stream for the over 50s tomorrow, and that given only 42% of the over 60s have actually received a booster. Can you tell us when you expect that cohort to be completed? Will you share with us the vaccination plan as it's known from now into the new year, by cohort, by vaccination type and by timeline? That type of information would be hugely important to allay concerns about the new variant, but also important in terms of giving people hope for the new year, including for sectors that are impacted by restrictions. Finally, Taoiseach, I welcome the fact that NIAC has today approved vaccines for children. When will these vaccines commence? Where will they be administered? Will the capacity be increased in parallel with the booster campaign? And when, importantly, is the information campaign for parents about vaccines for children going to start? We saw what happened when you brought in the mandatory mask wearing for schools overnight and then threatened to exclude children for non-compliance, without first explaining the basics of why it was deemed necessary. Do you have an information campaign ready to go to explain the benefits of vaccines for children so that parents have all the facts they need and this information is not guiding their decision making? So to recap, are the number of appointments actually increasing? What are you doing about the system and the double bookings? Will you give us an indicative vaccination plan before Christmas into the new year? And the information campaign is vitally important for parents. When will that be rolled out?
Taoiseach, please.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising the issue, because what I said yesterday and what I said today is, and it's not blaming people, but it's just really to underline the importance of the booster, particularly in the light of the Omicron arrival and variant. And just talking to the President of the European Commission, talking to others, there's still a bit to go in terms of interpreting the data and the research and the science. The science seems to indicate that we're looking at a more infectious and more transmissible variant, but that vaccination still gives protection against disease and hospitalization in ICU. So there really has to be a very clear message from all of us to people that when you get your opportunity to get the booster, to please take it, because it does give you quickly, it'll actually give you a very quick increase in antibodies and in terms of your capacity to resist severe disease and illness from both Delta but also Omicron. And if you look at how transmissible Delta is, the early evidence suggests that Omicron is more infectious and has an advantage over Delta. We can see what's happening in the UK. We can see what's happening in other countries where evidence is coming of how rapid it is developing. So that is a concern. And the best possible protection is to get the booster. And some early tests are showing that. but are also showing a weakening situation against Omicron in terms of the first and second dose, but that the third dose does significantly improve your capacity to avoid severe illness and disease. And yes, the HSE are working through their systems and so on, and the 50-year-olds it's open to 50 to 60-year-olds this week, and they're constantly reviewing how best to maximise the uptake in the next number of weeks. In terms of the booster campaign itself, we are at 1 million, just over 1 million. We're about 4th in Europe, but it seems to me, looking ahead and immediately ahead, I think the most effective thing we can do as a country is to do everything we possibly can to get as many people the booster as quickly as we can. And that's, in my view, what is required. And so I do say to people out there, if you get the opportunity to get the booster, take it. The pharmacies are helpful, but by no means do they cover anywhere near critical mass of those being vaccinated. The GPs have been very strong, to be fair, in terms of the older age cohorts. And that has to be said, and I pay tribute to the GPs for their work and to those pharmacies that have taken it up. Just if I quickly on the children and vaccinations, NIAC have now made recommendations around the administration of paediatric vaccines. They've recommended the following: that children aged 5 to 11 years with an underlying condition, living with a younger child with complex medical needs, living with an immunocompromised adult should receive the Pfizer vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer. This should be offered in parallel with booster doses for those of all ages with underlying conditions. And then it goes with further, which I can elaborate later, but the Department of Health and HSE are now working on a plan involving the information campaign that you advised, and we'll do that, and we'll be back within a number of days publishing that plan.
Deputy Murphy.
Taoiseach, many of the public did feel blamed yesterday when it wasn't their fault, and there's a system failure there. You need to find ways of fixing that system, that we're not duplicating and being wasteful, and people are queuing longer maybe than they need to, which is, I think, maybe one of the reasons in the winter why people might be put off and making alternative arrangements. In terms of you need to give us an assurance about those systems, because there is a problem there, and the HSE have acknowledged that. The vaccination plan for all cohorts, Taoiseach, I know you can't be certain about things because things will change, but an indicative plan going into the new year would be really helpful for across the cohorts, the vaccination types. For example, the Janssen vaccine has, becomes less, less of a protection in a reasonably short period of time. I think we need to see that plan before Christmas. I think the public would find a degree of reassurance in that, particularly given what you've said about Omicron. And I think, just finally, Taoiseach, just to say about the TRIPS waiver, like, nobody's safe until everybody's safe. Really, Europe has to change its attitude. You're talking to European counterparts. Look, we have to be pushing that in terms of making sure other jurisdictions have the kind of cover that they need to, because none of us we're going to all have different variants if that's not done.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
First of all, the HSE acknowledge that they do have to improve systems, but it's more than that. And in my conversations with all the principals yesterday, there was a sense, to be frank about it, that the same urgency that applied to getting your first and second dose wasn't just quite there in terms of the third dose. I'm just not in any casting blame or anything like that, but just in urging and saying to everybody, the booster has very significant positive impacts in strengthening your immune system against this disease and against new variants, and particularly getting severely ill or ending up in hospital or ending up in ICU. And we know from those who are in ICU, we know up to 50% are unvaccinated. And a similar figure for those hospitalised. And again, we've had a voluntary system here, which I support wholeheartedly. I don't believe in any mandatory approaches to vaccination at all. And I think through the voluntary system in Ireland, we've achieved, very high levels. And that's the approach we should take. And even now, people are coming forward to get their first dose, even now. and that's encouraging because of the points we've been making. And in terms of the TRIPS waiver, I just have to say, like, the European Union has been the best continent. It's exported about 750 million doses to 150 countries. And
We're way
again-
over time,
Okay.
Taoiseach, please.